What's up? This is Robert from Existence First. I'm here with another episode of what I'm going to call the Spiritual Self-Defense Podcast. Just a small lecture every Saturday at 2 o'clock. But what is spiritual self-defense? This is protection for your mind, your emotions, and your life. Just like when you go out in the real world and you have to defend yourself against attackers, so too you must defend the very integrity of your living. You must defend your mind, which is going to be attacked from all sides by laziness, self-doubt, lack of confidence, sloppy thinking, and even criticism from other people. So this space here is where we come to strengthen. And this podcast is sponsored by my coaching company, Existence First, which is a community of deep thinkers dedicated to self-help and personal growth. People who value knowledge that works over knowledge that doesn't. That being said, let's get started. So the topic this week, I was planning to do a huge talk on this whole George Floyd thing, which resulted also in protests and whether connected or not, this issue of looting and violence. And I'm really not feeling it. I'm not going to do a long lecture because a lot of things have happened in the last few days, and the flow of energy is just not going in that direction. So I'm not going to fight the current and go upstream. I'm going to go downstream with something else, which is a slight offshoot of one tiny piece of the George Floyd incident. Now, that incident and that whole story is so all-encompassing and crosses so many different disciplines. There's so many angles you can look at it from. To use a metaphor, it's like a large tree with a lot of branches and you can walk all the way around the tree and you can see that there's like 200 different branches, right? There's a sociological angle you can take on it. There's like a race and equality perspective you can take on it. There's a aggression, police brutality angle you can take on it, right? Well, I'm not a sociologist and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to take the legal angle. I work in psychology. This is what I do for a living and what I've been doing for 8 years. So, and I'm going to take a very logical perspective on it. On this one tiny part, okay? I worked during my 8 years at some points as a crisis counselor, right? And in crisis situations, I don't know how many of you have been in crisis situations, but they're not the easiest to handle. It's not easy to make decisions when people are screaming and yelling or when there's violence going on. And yet, you got to do that. You got to do that if you're in the military. You got to do that if you're in law enforcement. You have to do that if you work in mental health. And as I watched that video, the New York Times put out a YouTube video where they kind of like broke down the whole incident. And early on in the incident, George Floyd does not want to get into the squad car. And the reason that he doesn't want to get into the squad car, according to this New York Times video, was that he was claustrophobic. So he said he didn't want to be in the squad car. I think he was cuffed already, and he said, I'm claustrophobic, I don't want to go in the squad car. Now, from my perspective, and I probably don't have the same reaction that everybody else does, as soon as I saw that, like, huge warning lights go off in my mind, like, okay, great, this is the wrench in the machine that's going to, break things, right? It's not good. And of course, you have to be prepared for things like that, but let me just give an example that I've experienced, right? So when I worked at a kids facility one time with extreme levels of physical aggression, where we had to do, like, fights would break out on a daily basis. You might put a kid in timeout, right? I'm speaking generically, right? You might put a kid in timeout, and he'll say, you'll tell him go in that corner, and he'll say, I don't want to sit in that corner. I there's spiders in that corner. And then it's like, great, okay, well, now you have to take a position as a staff member. Do you be an asshole and tell this kid, who cares, you're going to get bit, I don't care if you get bit, go sit in that corner where the spiders are? Or are you going to be like nice and considerate and be like, okay, well, you don't have to sit in that corner, you can come sit in this corner, right? And as you learn and gain experience, you'll realize that a lot of times the kids will set it up in a certain way. So the spider is not the real reason. The real reason is something else. So for instance, I don't know how well you can see this. Actually, it is showing up well. If this is the layout and you tell the kid you want them in this corner and they say, no, I don't want to go in that corner because there's spiders, and you say, all right, fine, you can go to this corner, right? The reason they wanted to go to this corner is because there's another kid in this corner, so now they can see each other, and then they begin to give each other the middle finger, and before you know it, you walk over here to go deal with some other incident, and the two kids that had been giving each other the middle finger are now in a fist fight. One of them ends up bloody, and now you got to do another incident report. Now this all starts from the initial kid giving resistance, saying, I don't want to sit in that corner because there's a spider, right? So that takes a lot of experience, right? You need a veteran staff to be working that shift if you want it to go smoothly, because that veteran staff has heard that remark a million times, and they know how to handle objections like that. So that being said, there's so many things to that could be said about that incident, right? No doubt it's more than unfortunate what happened in Minneapolis, but let's take one perspective on it, right? And this is actually the point of today's lecture that I wanted to make. The point is that I have respect for engineers. Okay, my father was an engineer, and one thing that I admire about him is he was a problem solver. The way that engineers are is there's a problem that comes up. Well, you have a design, right? You have a design, you want to make something, right? You want to make, I don't know, a bench, right, to sit on. And you get the wooden planks and you start nailing nails or screwing screws or whatever, and then something happens. The screws are not holding it correctly, or right? And then you need to solve that. You need to either get different types of screws, or you need to install some sort of clamp or whatever. You need to come up with a solution, right? And even though I work in social services, I see those same abilities extremely valuable, right? Even the best social workers and the best caseworkers don't get overly emotional. They actually think like engineers. They solve problems. When a client has an objection, like, oh, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to take my medication, the very skilled caseworker has an answer for that. They don't just get angry and yell or something, right? They don't put the client in a restrainer, right? They have answers for that, right? They solve the problem. Now, I had a roommate, the last place that I lived at, I had a few roommates, and I think a lot of them were engineers, but one specifically was had a very calm demeanor, and he was an extremely good problem solver. So anytime that something came up, like, what was an incident? Like one time he had a package that was that was stolen from the porch, right? Like an Amazon package that was stolen, and and he was upset about that. But I never heard him complain about it. What I witnessed is that the day after his package was stolen, I saw him on a ladder installing security cameras over the porch, right? Or let's say one time our smoke detectors were going off or whatever, and even though we replaced the batteries, they were still going off, and we were like, what in the world, right? I was getting annoyed, but this guy was completely unemotional, and he was just thinking through, okay, if the batteries were not the cause of the problem, then it's probably the connection to the electricity, or it's the expiration date. Like he was actually thinking logically through the problem during a very emotional, or it could have been emotional time, right? It's like trying to go to sleep at 11 o'clock at night, and these alarms are just going beep, 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 even though you took the batteries out. It's like, right? And there's going to be a separation right there between people who get between people who can handle frustrations. Let's say this is a high frustration tolerance, right? And this is a low tolerance. And if you don't know what a bell curve is a way to represent the diversity in a population, right? So not everybody, for instance, is 5'5", right? You have a lot of people that are kind of like between 5 foot and 6 foot. You have a lot. But then there's some small minority that are under 5 feet tall, and there's a small minority that are above 6 foot tall, right? So that's how you represent the diversity of a population. Now you can do that not only with height, but also with emotions. So in any population, you have a small minority that have an extremely low frustration tolerance, and these people are not successful in life at all. And it's sad to see, but they lose their cool with any little hiccup, any little problem. They blow up, right? And then you have average people here, which they've got a degree of like patience and understanding, but they'll get upset at if things keep going wrong, they'll get upset enough, or if things go wrong enough, they'll get upset. Then you've got this high. Then you got to look at the upper end, the top tier, the top 5% in terms of people with a high frustration tolerance. These people, even when stuff is going crazy wrong, these people are calm, right? Those are the people you want as police officers. Those people make very good mental health counselors. One thing I'm very proud about working in mental health is that a lot of my coworkers, I would say, fit that description. Not all, but many. Many are extremely patient. Even they might be hearing a depressed person talk, or someone who's angry or depressed or anxious, and yet they're still very calm and they're listening, and right. So in any case, you have this diversity in terms of emotional dispositions. Now, one thing I want to point out is that Warren Buffett is the wealthiest person in the world, right? Or if not the wealthiest, he's one of the wealthiest. And you have to ask why. Why is this man, when everybody wants wealth, why is this man the only one to pull it off? So there's a documentary. So if you go to YouTube and you just search Warren Buffett and you watch the documentary on how he is, you're going to find that he's extremely logical. He's not very emotional. The mechanics of it is of the money that he made is he buys companies, right? So when you buy stock, that's ownership in a company. So if you bought shares of Apple, 20 years ago, then you would have made a lot of money by now, right? Same thing with Amazon. So Warren Buffett spends 6+ hours a day reading and studying and looking for patterns, right? That's what intelligent people do. They look for patterns and they look for causes and effects. So Warren Buffett studies what to look for to know whether a company is going to get big or not. And then he just chooses to invest in the companies that are going to get big. So that's how he made his money, right? But if you watch this documentary, you gotta see him, you gotta see how he operates, and you gotta look at his set of emotions, okay? You gotta look at how he's going about. He's not high strung. He's not a high maintenance, a dude. He's driven the same car for like 20 years, even though he's like a billionaire, right? Lives in the same house, right? He likes his routine, okay? But these are all hints at how do people become successful, and what role does intelligence and logic play in being successful. This book I was revisiting a little bit. A Little Bit of Common Sense Investing by John Bogle, who's the founder of Vanguard. Very wealthy person, and actually there's a quote by Warren Buffett on here. So this book was given to me by my friend Johnny, who's extremely skilled at the stock market and managing his money, right? He's done very well for himself, and he retired early because of that. Now you got to ask, why was he able to do that? And it's because he understands things with logic. When this Corona thing came out, I called him up and I said, hey, I think I'm going to pull all of my money out of stocks and put it in cash, because I think the market's going to go down, isn't it? And he responded, well, it will, but because my argument was it's going to be like the Great Depression, because the 1920s were very prosperous, and then then they had to take a dive. I told him 2008 to 2020 was like all upwards, so now it's going to go down, right? And his answer was that, well, in the Great Depression, the government had like fewer. The government didn't do anything, whereas right now the government is like way more active, and with the stimulus packages and the stimulus payments that people have been getting, the COVID payments or whatever. He said the government's pumping so much money into the economy that there's not going to be a crash. But regardless of what the answer is, what stood out to me was that his mind was so clear, right? It was so absolutely clear. He had a reason, right? When you talk to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, it sounds very different. They'll respond with, "Oh yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen," or you'll get those people who are really certain, but they have zero reason. Well, I don't know. I just know that it's gonna be this way. I just know, right? And then, sure enough, come back 3 months later and they lost all their money, right? And it's because they're just not using their intelligence. And that's how you can tell. Because to me, the red flag is when I hear someone who's very emotional. That to me is the red flag, to not take advice from them. But I mean, you could look at their life also, and then you'll see how successful they are in life. But the thing is, solving problems and getting things done is in large part a matter of logic, right? So as we talk about, as these people are looting and all sorts of things, people are arguing, should we defund the police, blah blah blah, or right? It's what's happening is you have a large population of people that are responding emotionally, right? And maybe justifiably so, but it's two different things, to have an emotional reaction and to solve a problem. Those are two different, almost like two different stages, right? Like they have the stages of grieving, right? Like denial, anger, bargaining, right? Eventually arriving at acceptance, So maybe people go through these stages. But if you're going to solve a problem, you need to get into this stage of logic and intelligence. So, in any case, I think that's all that needs to be said for this week. And we'll do another talk next Saturday at 2. If you're not on the Facebook or the YouTube, make sure you subscribe or follow the Facebook, YouTube, and the Instagram. And we've been posting a lot of great stuff. My assistant has been helping me post to Instagram, so thank you for that to my assistant, and we will see you next Saturday.